Desna, thank you, Preeti ji, uh, for this 154th webinar of the webinar series, Rethinking City, that INHAF and multiple partners have been running for a very long time. This one is the fifth event of the series on urban Odisha in the context of Vision 2036. And we are this today looking at Berhampur, and has a very interesting title. It's called Odisha's Gateway to Southwest Growth Corridor. I must tell who are new, and of course to the panel as well, who may not know, but we had previously done 4 webinars on Odisha city, in which we covered Puri, Koraput, Rourkela, and today is Berhampur, and we hope the last one, yes, the last one at this point of time is going to be on Bhubaneswar, Cuttack. So we essentially are covering lots of urban centers in Odisha. Now, because I tend to forget all the time to thank people, and I have a huge excuse for forgetting. I said, look, I'm 84 years old, so I think I have a right to forget. But because I forget all the time, I'm going to kind of do my thank you work to begin with. I'm going to start my small little thing with thank you. One is of course, the first thank you is to the co-organizers, which includes Socrates, Extreme University, and Gram Vikas. And I'm especially thankful to Gram Vikas. The reason is this, that can you hear me?
Yes.
The reason is this, that they are essentially a rural organization focusing on the rural India, rural Odisha, rural people, rural issues, rural context. But very gratefully, I think, agreed to kind of be part of this, which is essentially and almost exclusively urban phenomenon. So that is my thank you due especially to Ram Vikas also. I'm also grateful to Preeti ji, which is Preeti Panigrahi ji, the director of Reimagining Ideas Foundation. And I have told any number of times whenever this webinars have taken place that but for her, this would have never happened. And this is not the way of saying, this is actually factually correct. No one had any idea of Odisha. And all the people that have come, 25 people as panelists, I hardly knew anyone. And of course, we had no background on Odisha. So I'm very, very grateful to Preeti ji for making this. It would have been absolutely impossible without her. So thank you very much. I also must, and because I forget thanking my colleagues, I must thank Zezna, who works behind the scene and makes all this possible. I don't even know how it works, but it works because of her. And of course, I must thank Bomaji and other colleagues who make it possible. I also must thank today's panelists, because there'll be no webinar today without the panelists, and therefore, Dr. Namesh. Namesh, I couldn't spell your Killemsetty?
Killemsetty, yes.
Killemsetty, okay. At the MIT School of Government, Pune, and I just discovered that he's from SEPT, where I'm from too.
Yes.
And that we had met not less than 20 years ago. So thank you, Namesh Saab.
Sure.
Also, Shri Bhrugu Saab is from Southern Odisha Development Forum, and we want to really look forward to hearing what is happening in terms of Southern Odisha's development. Also, Bibhu Prasad Sahu Saab from Youth for Social Development, and Sanjog Sahuji from Mati Farms, is that? And of course, Preeti ji for making this, moderating this whole event. So that takes care of my my thank you and my grateful thanks. And if I've forgotten, please excuse me, as I said, because I'm old. I also wanted to tell you very quickly that today is the 154th webinar. We have been running this webinar series for the last 5 years. We have had as many as 600 urban experts and professionals and community groups, from all over the world participating. And we have been calling this webinar series Rethinking City. Idea is this, that, we believe that if you want to meet urban challenge properly, we don't only require answers that we know, we also require to rethink about many things. I'm not going to go into that, but that has been the kind of theme for a very long time. And we have uh, we have basically speaking uh, have covered as many as uh, I would say 25, 30 major urban themes, have 300 hours of ideas and perspectives stored in recording, and we are trying to kind of find ways to convert into some kind of knowledge products. And one knowledge product which is around the corner, and I would like to mention that very much, is a book called City Economies in the Global South: Growth, Inclusion, and Sustainability. This particular book is being published by Routledge, internationally famous publishers, and it is based on 7 webinars we organized on the related subjects, and then of course we had something like 60, 70 contributors. It's a huge book, and I think will be out, if my understanding is correct, in the next 2 months' time. And we hope it to come out uh, in October. Last thing that I wanted to do is a bit departure from what normally do. Normally, I think I talk about what is our understanding of urban challenge, why we think we need to focus on rethinking. Today, I'm going to quote someone. It's a very small quote, but I was very impressed when I read it. This was an article, I think a very small article in the Express yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. And this was by none other than Amitabh Kant. He was talking about 5 wins and 5 frontiers for India. And while talking about 5 frontiers, he started first with urbanization. And this is what he said, and I thought was very interesting and very impressive. He said, the first frontier, in terms of something we need to achieve, something that we have not done, the first frontier is urbanization. India cannot become a high income economy with low productivity, congested, and polluted cities. Cities must become engines of growth. Municipal bonds, land value capture, and user charges must complement budgetary resources. The Urban Challenge Fund must crowd in private investment rather than become another grant program. Public transport, waste management, water, air quality, and transit-oriented development must be treated as economic infra. I thought it was a terrific statement. He always writes very beautifully. This was very, very impressive when I thought I would leave and hand over to Preeti ji to continue this session with this quote. So thank you very much again for all the panelists, and thank you, Preeti ji, for moderating the session. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirti ji. Just as always, when I begin, I've always made it a point to cite the reason why we did it. So it was one of the initial conversation where we were trying to understand, demystify how urbanization is at play in Orissa. And last year, the government kind of introduced the urban vision. And so there was a lot of speculations in terms of how urbanization is being looked up as a development agenda in the state and how far are we looking at it. So primarily the choosing of cities was also something that was tricky. We didn't know whether we should have a Koraput in the cluster, because when you're talking urban, not many will kind of position that. But you can see that every city is designed differently and is also undergoing some sort of a challenging scenario due to urbanization or as an aftermath to urbanization. So we started picking up on some of these parameters in terms of defining. And something very interesting with Berhampur was always an obvious choice. So you have to talk about urbanization and Berhampur in the same light. There's no two way about it. And there is a traditional form of how do you imagine urbanization, because it's also one of the few municipalities that was a municipalities before independence. So there's a legacy to how Berhampur as a city has been has continued to be urban. So and I'm so glad that all four of the panelists today kind of agreed to be part of the process, because in one form or another, all of them wear multiple hats, but each one of them is connected by a single dot of being either positioning the agenda of Berhampur or being working out of that space. So with this, I will begin. And the way I would like to help you kind of shape it, because not only this is live and recorded, but is also has a lot of people who do not belong to Orissa. Or even there are times when people out of the country also kind of join some of these conversations. So while you do a context setting, just a quick reminder that you need to think that your audience may or may not understand a couple of dynamics that can come naturally for us being an Odia in the room. So if that will be helpful when you kind of bring it together. But I'll kind of start with Dr. Namesh and help us paint a picture of Berhampur in the sense that when you think Berhampur, what does it mean to you? And this is more from how culturally, economically, the shaping of the city has been.
Thank you so much, Preeti, for inviting me, first of all. When I talk about Berhampur, I can always start with a personal context. Having been in the city and having seen the city grow for the last 35 years, um, and also in that the 5 years or so where I lived inside its slums for my own doctoral research. I feel that when you really talk about Berhampur's institutional capacity, its skilling ecosystem, or even aspirations, it's very important to understand how the city really positions itself. And a lot of it comes down to the fact of how the city's location being in southern Orissa and acting as I would say the magnet as such for large scale migration of people from areas around it, looking at the place for all kind of economic or commercial development. The city has gained its own importance. And one aspect, and that is something that I have focused a lot in my own research and something that I've been passionate about, is understanding the lens of how the city has been living informally, because that is how we can really understand the governance being working or not working at all. So when you talked about Berhampur having one of the oldest municipalities, even before independence, but when we really look at it from an institution perspective, it became a municipal corporation only in 2008, right? So that way you have a very young institution who has been asked to do a very old job. And that way the gaps have shown up exactly in terms of how you expect in the very basics. I'll go into the details of my own research as we call in the podcast, but a lot of it when it comes down to how we, in terms of how the slums have been studied, because I think the last major survey that was done was in 2019, which was done in collaboration with Tata Trusts and the Berhampur Municipal Corporation, where it found around like 25% of the city living in slums, spread across, I think, anywhere between 175 to 250 settlements. Now that depends on whose count you are, like whose count you are like really using. So that gap in numbers, it's itself a symptom. And a large share of this workforce, of the city's workforce, that includes daily wage labor, the small trade, domestic work, comes from these very slums. So any discussion or economic connector stories, I think, has to reckon with who is doing this connecting.
Thank you so much for bringing some of these issues into forefront. And the fact is that the way some of you have come into the panel, it's bringing into that lenses on which you have kind of worked. I'll kind of move on to Bhrugu. He has, and I've personally known him for more than 10, 12 years now, and he's been front-ending a lot of people's agenda in Odisha, beyond, and within Berhampur. And would like to hear the perspective of the people of the region, Bhrugu, in terms of what are some of the development agendas, what are some of the economic priorities that has happened, and what is this historical shift that the city needs to look at?
Thank you, Preeti. Good evening, everybody here. And thank you so much, Mr. Kirti Shah, for those opening remarks and the perspective of Mr. Amitabh Kant and how we roll this discussion too. Good to hear from Dr. Namesh Killemsetty. I mean, this surname doesn't sound Berhampuria at all, but however, I'm so happy that he's from Berhampur. The other panelists, good evening, everybody. I'm so happy that when Mr. Kirti Shah said that there was lesser known facts about Odisha, and Preeti has brought in Odisha into the forefront by bringing these discussions. Thank you, Preeti. Berhampur is one of the major towns, not yet a city, towns of Odisha, and we are talking about sitting on a population of, I'm not going by the absolute numbers, but sitting on a population of almost 5 lakh right now. And if somebody who comes to Berhampur, not a Berhampuria or Odia at all, would think that this is an overgrown village. Berhampur, with all its history, Berhampur's culture, Berhampur's contribution to the formation of state of Odisha, Berhampur's huge contribution to Odia nationalism, Berhampur being in the borders of Andhra Pradesh, Berhampur being partly, being in southern Odisha, it is also, people think that it's part of coastal Odisha now because it's got coastline on it. Berhampur being the new city where the development plans, the expansion plans of the state governments and the national government are. Berhampur has a huge challenge to face as we go ahead. But I guess as we spend time during this discussion, we will understand that we cannot talk about Berhampur. Berhampur is like any other urban town, like all other towns in Odisha, the country. But Berhampur needs to be discussed with its history, with its historical background, how Berhampur was formed, its demographic combination, and what are the aspirations, what the government is already doing in there, what the government plans, and how the people of Berhampur assimilate and adjust and grow along with the plan and the progress of the city. I mean, there are huge things which are coming up about Berhampur, but is Berhampur ready for all this? Is Berhampur equipped for all this? I think we need to deal in that as we go ahead. I think these are my initial remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bhrugu. What always interests me while you talk is the historical perspective that you bring into some of these conversations altogether, and the shift in the narrative while
Yeah.
and we will be glad to kind of hear, because this is just the opening part of it, and we'll be
Yes,
glad
yes.
to hear that. And so we'll kind of move on to Bibhu. Bibhu has also been somebody I've kind of worked with in the past, and we've known each other. And he's also passionate about a lot of issues, as Berhampur as a destination, I might say, not just the urban part of it. So he brings in a lot of inclusive lenses from children, women, youth perspective, and that's where I would want to place the question with your book, Bibhu, around how do you imagine Berhampur?
Yeah. Thank you, Preeti, for bringing me here. Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I personally brought up, studied, and working here only. Though I have many opportunity to roam around the world, but yeah, I'm a pure Barimpuria. So I think, I mean, coming to the discussion point, I think the most important thing to recognize is that there is not one Barampur. Different people experience the same city very differently. For children and youth, Barampur is a city of education and aspiration. For patients, it is a healthcare destination. For traders, it is a market. For migrants or informal workers, it is a place to find livelihood. And for a peri-urban farmers, the growing city can be both opportunity and the source of pressure. So when we talk about urban growth, I think particularly in terms of Berhampur, I think we need to ask who benefit, who carries the cost, and whose voice is heard. Let me begin with some of these stakeholders. For example, children, adolescent, and young people. Berhampur attracts many young people because of education, healthcare, and employment opportunities. But we need to ask what kind of city we are creating for them. A child-friendly city is not only about schools, it needs about safe neighborhoods, playgrounds, clean public spaces, safe mobility, healthcare, and opportunities for participation. For adolescents, particularly girls, safety, mobility are critical. Can they travel safely? Can they access sports, libraries, digital spaces, and opportunities outside their home? And for youth, we need to move beyond creating only jobs. Come to a woman's experience. The city differently because their opportunities are closely connected to safety, mobility, and care responsibility. A woman may have livelihood opportunities, but if transport is unsafe and there is no child care, that opportunity is not genuinely accessible. Similarly, for the informal workers, is not outside Berhampur's economy. The formal workers, the informal workers is a part of Berhampur's economy. Instead of asking how do we remove informality, I think you should ask how do we make informal livelihoods more secure, productive, and dignified. And for migrants, employment is not just enough. Housing, water, sanitation, healthcare, education, transport, and social protection. This is why I often say affordable housing should mean affordable living. Finally, the peri-urban farmers. Farmers around Berhampur are part of the urban economy. They provide food to the city while the city provides markets and consumers. But urban expansion puts pressure on agriculture, land, and water. So to stop thinking of agriculture land simply as land waiting to be urbanized. Peri-urban agriculture is a part of Berhampur's food infrastructure. I think urban planning needs to balance the growth with the protection of land, water, livelihood, and ecological assets. Thank you.
Yeah. I think while I hear some of you, and of course in the earlier webinars also, what has been very interesting to find is that there is nothing which is tied by a boundary of an urban. What we are talking today is fundamental, whether people should have housing, access to food system, they should have better sanitation facilities, or should be access to water. So the fundamentals of living a life is what we are expecting. And whether that comes with a tagline of an urban or not urban, that is beyond conception. But moving on to see how urbanization is also equally coined as a development agenda, and saying that cities will become the engines of economic growth. But for traditional cities, that has always been the case, or maybe the towns or the villages, they have remained to retain their identities in some form or another. So I'll also move on to Sanjog. Thanks for coming, Sanjog, and would like to hear, like Bibhu brought in the aspect of agriculture. What we are also closely realizing with the advancement of cities, how these corridors of urban-rural boundaries are coming together, and how our food systems are also equally becoming part of the urban agenda today. So please bring in some of your insights working.
Thank you, Preeti. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Kriti Shah, Dr. Killemsetty, Bhrugu Bhai, Bibhu. Just when I was invited to this panel, I was a little hesitant because my connection to Berhampur goes back generations. I'm connected to the city by origin. My ancestors have been going there to make their futures for the last 200, 300 years because we hail from a village very close to Berhampur. But personally, I only visited Berhampur for the first time only 5 years back. So my connection to the city is tenuous at best, and that is primarily through my work in Mati Farms, where we have a small collection hub there, where the peri-urban farmers or the farmers in that district get their produce there, and it is through that activity that have come to know a certain section of the cross section of the city's population. Um, but so Bibhu has already touched upon, a little bit about that. So I'll keep that aside. There are many thoughts here, many ways of conceiving Berhampur. By training, I'm an ecologist. So I would say that, like Bhrugu Bhai said, Berhampur is, it's a melting pot. It is, like everyone here has said, it has many cultures. There are many Berhampurs, and just like it is a cultural sponge, it has been there for a very long time. It is not just the municipal corporation limits or both geographically otherwise. But it's also, there's another way of looking at Berhampur, which is what I've seen, is that it has a lot of water bodies that are often, centers of, they become public spheres in themselves and where people congregate. And often those water bodies have been revived. They take in some amount of sewage. There are concurrent issues of flooding and, during monsoons. Uh, what I'm trying to say is that it is, I think, important to view Varampur not just as a cultural sponge, but also an ecological sponge, as is true of most coastal Odisha cities. They've been built around hydrologies, and as the cities have expanded and grown, those hydrologies have been, this hydrology of the city has been, is something that we often tend to forget. When we try to build infrastructure, when we try to create growth plans, a lot of that imagination or the or memories of the past are lost, and they only come to the fore every time there's some kind of a infrastructural breakdown in the form of floods and whatnot, and those affect the city disproportionately. The 25% population, that is, the slum population that I've sometimes have come to interact with, those are the people who have often moved there because they don't have any other options, because their livelihoods and their farming activity or whatever in the peripheries have been disrupted by the growth of the city over the centuries, and therefore they have moved there. So it's doubly ironical that, once they move to the city also, they're the first ones to feel the effects of the city's planning, or the lack of. So there's a certain amount of systems theory that comes into, I think, looking at Berhampur, which we don't, which is that, it's organized chaos. When I told my relatives in Berhampur that, hey, I'm going to be talking about Berhampur, please don't judge me for it, they joke that, hey, what do you know about the city other than Pida Hotel? Like, which I've gone to oftentimes. And to me, that's very symbolic of, how, like, as an institution, it's an exalted institution. It kind of throws every food business logic and protocol out of the window, because, like, in terms of hygiene, in terms of, but at the same time, it just works, right? There are hundreds of people going there. To me, that's largely symbolic of how the city operates as an outsider, where it's organized chaos. It's beautiful to see it in a way, and it sort of makes you think that maybe there are other ways to conceive the city in terms of its bhaichara culture, in terms of its, the syncretism. But at the same time, I think I would also like us to maybe look at Berhampur through an ecological lens rather than just a purely economic or cultural lens as we reimagine the city's future. So I think today I'm going to try and do that more than talk about the farming and the peri-urban activities that both affect and are affected by Berhampur's growth.
Amazing, and glad you try to kind of position that in terms of linking your origins back. That also presses me to understand, like a lot of you trace your DNA from Berhampur. So the purest form of who is a Berhampuriya, non-Berhampuriya, I would just go back to the origin, and I'll try to kind of bring in Bhrugu into the conversation, because we would like to hear what is that part of Berhampur which people talk about. And in Odisha, being a Berhampuriya is a separate identity in itself. And but over the years, what we also see that, like rightfully we have imagined that it's retaining with its tradition legacy, but much of the development fortes that we are talking about, the aspirational state, is a missing link here. Bhrugu, can you blend that for us?
I heard everybody, and everybody's is a subject expert here. I'm not one. I will just speak about Berhampur in as a macro subject. Like every other town, if you look at Bengalis, they would say Kolkata is my city. If you look at anybody in Jagatsinghpur, Kendrapada, Jajpur, they would say Cuttack is my city. If you look at people from Khordha, they would say Bhubaneswar is my city. So I would like to bring that to Berhampur, and that's how it is. I don't know how to exactly put it, but Berhampur is a city of all Ganjamians. Anybody who is from Ganjam, the first big city is Berhampur. So let's start there. And because Berhampur and Ganjam, we are a very emotional people. We take pride in the fact that had it not been for Ganjam or Berhampur, the state of Odisha wouldn't have been formed. So we trace ourselves not just to 2026 while we are sitting here. We go back to many, many years before that. Maybe in 1802, when the first mutiny against the British started, it started from Ganjam. The present Ghumsar, the present Bhanjanagar, the present Kandhamal. And that's where it all happened. The state of Odisha was formed because of an organization called Utkal Sammilani, which is the first nationalist, the only nationalist organization of Odisha. And had it not been for Utkal Sammilani, Odisha wouldn't have been a state. And the first conference of Utkal Sammilani happened in Rambagh, which is about 50 kilometers from Berhampur. So, had it not been for the Paralakhamandi Gajapati, the Krishna Chandra Gajapati, we wouldn't have been able to hold on to the southern region of Odisha today. So, if you look at Odisha, Odisha is an amalgamation of three regions: the southern province, the central province, and the Madras presidency, the Calcutta presidency, and central province. So 1936, we were the first linguistic state of Odisha. And all that you see in southern Odisha today, the undivided Koraput district of 4, the Gajapati, the Ganjam, and the Kandhamal, these 7 districts are what we brought from the Madras presidency. So therefore, you have a lot of southern influence in southern Odisha. And we are a border to Andhra Pradesh, the present day Andhra Pradesh. So that's where we come from. And we are a very hardworking people. We are very enterprising people. So the initial days, we were the ones who migrated right up to Burma. We were the ones who migrated right up to South Asia. And there is a port even today near Ramba, which is no more functional. It's dead and gone. People from Ganjam migrated all the way to Burma So all that the Burmese people who came back to Odisha or in India later, half of them came back and half of them stayed. So the migration started then. And even today, if you look at the people in Kandhamal, the people who are non-tribals, the people in southern Odisha, further down, undivided Koraput, they are all origins from Ganjam. And therefore, all of us, I grew up in undivided Koraput district, but I also, my previous generation also came from a small town called Digapahandi. So we are all from Ganjam. So today we are all, and we are our base city. For us, our city is Berhampur. And having said that, now Berhampur is being discussed. Berhampur, like Mr. Sahu said, Berhampur is different. We have too many Berhampurs in Berhampur. So Berhampur is looked at different people in a different order. But I would say that on a holistic point of view, without understanding the cultural, uh, without having a cultural understanding of Berhampur, without understanding the history of Berhampur, without the rich, the language, the art, the culture, the music, the weaving, the fabric, the food, I don't think we could have a new urban modern day Berhampur. To hold on to the old and to add new things to it, there has to be a proper amalgamation. And I think cities do not look nice if they do not combine these two. I mean, this is a very emotional part of seeing any urban town growing. Having said that, Berhampur today, there are people who are going to talk about ecology. There are people who are going to talk about how Berhampur, the slums, whether you call the facilities in Berhampur, are going to be shaped in. But I would like to look at the aspirations that people have. People in Berhampur or people in South Odisha or in Ganjam, if you look at Berhampur, if you look at South Odisha, I'm not trying to divide South Odisha. I'm trying to geographically make everybody understand that South Odisha has two portions now. One is south of South Odisha, which is the undivided Koraput district, and one is the northern part of South Odisha, which is Gajapati, Ganjam, and Kandhamal. We, we, some there are people who say that migration happened and there's a lot of losses because of migration. But migration also brings about 200 crores of remittance every month to the district. So we also need to understand why people migrated. People migrated because we did not have work for them. Now, as we go and as we, like you said, Preeti, that the government of Odisha is planning about the urban mission in 2025. So I do not know how planners like you or how people who are involved in urban planning would understand Berhampur and take it forward. There is a port which is being planned, the Bahuda port. The LNG terminal is coming up in Gopalpur. The Gopalpur port is being expanded. There is an industrial corridor which is going to connect, like your subject, um, a gateway to southern Odisha, an industrial corridor from Berhampur right up to Koraput. There are new railway lines which are coming in, which are being planned. So there are a lot of things which are being discussed. But uh, where does a person from that city adjust, see a future for himself or herself, grow in that development platform, in that development understanding? That is something which we need to understand. One more thing which I would like to recollect it with all the Berhampuras here. We have had a president from Berhampur. President of India, V.V. Giri, came from Berhampur. We have had 3 chief ministers from Berhampur, from Ganjam, Biju Patnaik, Biswanath Das, and Vinayak Acharya. We have had a prime minister from Berhampur, Mr. P.V. Narasimha. So Berhampur is politically also, socially, politically, a very conscious town. When you look at the political growth, the changes politically, Berhampur was predominantly a left dominated society. It moved to the Congress. It moved to the Janata. Now it has moved to the Bharatiya Janata Party. So we have our people have experienced everyone. Our people have seen the governance of every ideological format. Um, we have had great people from Berhampur. Do we know that Wahida Rahman started her career in Berhampur? Selina Jetli also studied in Berhampur. The CEO of Cognizant, Mr. Ravi Kumar, is from Berhampur. So we have Kota Harinarayan, who is the designer of Tejas, is also from Berhampur. So we have great luminaries from Berhampur. Their experiences, we being rich with all these personalities, also makes us more emotional about Berhampur. So, having said that, I think this is my initial thought, and I do not know how we are going to plan our future urbanization, keeping all this in the background. I think the industrialization that is happening, the institutes which are there, we have ISER there, we have the Berhampur University there, we have the Kalikot University, which is the oldest college in the state, older than the Ravinsha. We have the first engineering school in Odisha in Berhampur. We have an Army Defense College in Berhampur. So we have all of it. So, like Mr. Sahu said, for students, it's an educational hub. For healthcare, we have only one medical college, and therefore, for all our treatment, we either go to Vizag or we come to Bhubaneswar. So that's an area we need to look at. There are 4 airports which are closer to Berhampur, but Berhampur's demand for airport is still not worked out. So there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things like every society which has a lot of aspirations. We too have. I do not know. I think this is what I can think of right now.
No, amazing, Bhrigu. This is what I wanted to kind of bring it into the panel, and the reason being that irrespective of how you frame, and but there's something that is missing in terms of, because you are aware and you're part of the process, but how many of the people from Berhampur would know that there are so much of infrastructure development happening, there are corridors that are evolving in the next. So that was a question that we had, and how the people's participation in this process is also one of the significant areas. Are the people aware that there is seemingly a lot of things planned for them? Is it planned in cognizant with them? So I'll try to bring in Bibhu here, who has been kind of working a lot around the people's participation, and especially the kind of people that you mentioned about the migrant community who go out of Ganjam altogether. And necessarily what I would like to understand, Bibhu, from your perspective, and also to kind of spotlight on some of the things that Bhrigu has already brought, is that why is there a disconnect in terms of people's own understanding of how the government's priorities are being set and how people's aspirations are being met? So would you be able to kind of take us through that?
I think, as Bhrigu has already mentioned, that we are a political rich in terms of Ganjam district as a whole, and also Berhampur has a long history of people's participation in politics, not only politics but also policy making. But as I work on ground with the people in slums and other non-slum areas, I can tell you that the kind of policy arrangements has been made to people's participation. For example, there is a Ward Sabha, but the Ward Sabha actually working I mean, there is a big question because earlier, I think before this government, there was a Ward Sabha, there was town hall meeting. I personally participated in those meetings. But now it has not been operational. I think earlier it was a space for the city dwellers and slum dwellers, at least to speak about their problems, their issues, what are the challenges they face. And this is not only about the city dwellers, but also the poor people, the informal living in informal settlements. They are also got opportunity to speak in this kind of forums, particularly the Ward Sabha, the town hall meeting. But currently, I think this has not been operational. But I don't know how the city government has been taking decisions for the people. Having said this, I would also like to say that in terms of the planning of city and in terms of the governance, see, the local political parties and the ward elected officials, they generally have to be people centric. But since a long time it has been seen, they have been neglected by many forms. They are not going to the public, they are not asking, even though they have a ward office. But I hardly see any ward office is functional and nobody is sitting there. I think the corporator must sit at least for a grievance readdressal or to listen to the people, to understand people's perspectives, to understand people's ways. So all these things are actually non-functional nowadays. So in that sense, I am very unhappy, or I am very distressed that there is a very poor space for the people, for the city dwellers to at least speak about their issues, challenges, and aspirations. So, so I think I mean the entire participation of citizens has been very limited to just casting their vote once in 5 years. Apart from that, I think none of the city has the scope to, participate in planning, participation in local decision making, participation in any kind of activities what the municipal corporation and the other local governments does. This is what I have to say. Thank you, Preeti.
Yeah, thanks, Bibhu. And rightfully said, because Odisha also, primarily, if I look back half a decade back, there was an understanding and also conscious decision to establish ward committees. And at a, let's say, with the Jaga mission, what we were able to also establish was the Slum Dwellers Association, which could act like the fourth tier of governance in terms of feeding back people's perspective into their own agendas. And I just wanted to hear that from you, saying that some of this fundamental conditions which are created for participation of people are not in the rightful way functioning in a place like Ganjam. And like Bhrugu was bringing together, that it houses at least 3 chief ministers, and it houses all the people who are so politically conscious and have participated in so many ways in the development process of the region. So thank you for bringing into light some of this. And Namesh, I would like to hear, because also by the fact that your academic focus has been on Jaga Mission, and it has also kind of brought you a lot of understanding in terms of the informal settlements. Just take us through some of your experiences of how the Jaga Mission has functioned in that space, primarily because my experience has been that it was also some of these ULBs that became slum-free very initially. And there people were very pro in terms of their understanding their rights, their responsibilities in the domain space. So Dr. Namesh, can you just share some of your insights from the work that you have done?
Sure. So when the Jaga mission started way back in 2017, and in the first phase, where the clear idea was to provide tenure security and to convert and to transform this urban slums into inclusive, safe, and livable habitats. I remember, like, in the first phase of my research, I got the opportunity of studying slums in Berhampur as well as those in neighboring towns in Chhatrapur and in Gopalpur. And it was interesting because at that point of time, Berhampur and other municipal corporations were not included as part of the Jaga mission to be provided, where a land rights were provided to the slum dwellers. So it's interesting where Bhrigu and Vibhu, both of them talk about the politically active aspects of citizens. It was very interesting because from the very beginning itself, slum dwellers in Berhampur were very vocal about it, in terms of why they were being excluded from not being provided tenure security as compared to their counterparts in Chhatrapur and Gopalpur. And there was a lot of discussions that happened, where slum dwellers, even in the municipal corporations, really wanted to be a part of this. And I think it was only in 2019 or 2020 where finally it was expanded forward. It was expanded finally to the municipal corporation as well. But when it came to the city, it was very interesting because in many contexts, it was while most of the slum dwellers wanted to have the titles in the very land where they'd been living for decades, for the matter. Unfortunately, most of the implementation that happened under Jaga Mission was actually resettlement itself, where in many cases slum dwellers were in fact uprooted or like forced to be evicted from their original locations and sent further to the outskirts of the city. We had studied multiple resettlement neighborhoods as well that were established over time, and it was a sad awakening to just to have an understanding of the people who really wanted to be a part of the city. They've been working in the city's ecosystem for decades, having come from these rural areas in and around. And this forcible uprooting of their neighborhoods meant that they had to commute long distances just to be able to connect back to their economies, to send their kids to school. And that comes at a context where we have to highlight that Berhampur still does not have a strong public transportation network. So what that meant was that many dwellers, many of these residents who were forced to move outside had no other option than to completely rewire. In fact, I can take example of one slum that in fact Vibhu and I, both of us had like worked together. There's this interesting slum called Raghupati Nagar on the western side of the city. They were living around a public drain, because of which there had been multiple attempts by the municipal corporation to resettle them to the other area. And for the last from I think while they'd been living in the slums in that particular land since 70s, the municipal corporation had been emphasizing that they had to move to a resettlement colony which was further 6 kilometers away towards on the outskirts of the city. And at the end finally, at the end of it, what happened was they kept on emphasizing the need of being there because of their connections in and around the city. And this was 2017 and 18. I spent around 3 months in the slum talking to each and every resident about their aspirations and their excitement of being part of the Jaga mission. And after 5 years, I remember going back to the same slum with Vibhu, and it was just disturbing to see the entire slum, like there was no existence of that slum altogether. And when we try to kind of trace to the locations where most of the residents would have gone, we realized that more than half of them either went back to the villages where they had come from, or they had assimilated in other slums in and around the city. So I think in many ways, when it comes down to implementation of especially when you look at Jaga Mission in the urban context of that of Berhampur, a lot of it was around focused around resettlement itself that did not go along well with majority of the residents in the country, in the city. And again, a lot of that came back to the lack of the associations or the committees that Jaga Mission was supposed to empower, was create these associations and within each slum that could speak for on their behalf, and at the same time advocate on what they needed. So I think there was that difference clearly as compared to those slums in Chhatrapur or Gopalpur, where majority of the residents were able to get the lands in those locations itself. And that gave them a sense of satisfaction, which unfortunately again became a point of jealousy for those slum residents living in Berhampur. So I think that kind of did not work well. And to this extent, after now the change in the political party at the state level as well since 2024, what I have observed in the last 2 years is somehow unfortunate in terms of how, while there has been a stalling in terms of the provision of the land rights certificates. And yet the legacy of what the Jaga mission tried to do in its own way, I mean, it was successful to a certain extent, and somehow that has gone into a pause mode as such. So I think there's still a lot of work to happen, and that repercussions does come in terms of with respect to the provision of the infrastructure facilities, be it sanitation, be it water supply, be it transportation, as well as its connection to education, access to livelihood, and so on.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Namesh. I think it also kind of helps me reflect the fact that a lot of people were resettled closer to the proximities in Jaga was also because of the climate sensitivity of
Yes.
the region. And people living closer to the coast had nowhere to go. So the rightful way of looking at how can you really support that, because Gopalpur is also vulnerable to a lot of
Yes.
cyclones over the year. So therefore they were relocated, and it's more a climate issue than potentially an urban issue in that sense.
No,
And
it was the other way around. Actually, it
yeah,
was in Berhampur that there was a lot of resettlement. In case of Gopalpur, in I think in at least in 3 of the 4 slums where the Jaga mission was implemented, in many of the cases, people actually got the tenure in the very locations, or at least in close proximity to where they were living before. So
yeah.
it was in the context of Berhampur that people were actually more unsatisfied than that of the Chhatrapur or Gopalpur.
Yeah. So with this also, I'll try to shift to Sanjog and take him, because while I bring in climate, and I'll just nudge the ecologist in him and say that how do you see a climate responsive Berhampur to evolve? And that is more on the, let's say, on the planning and deciding factor of how cities should be prepared for it. Cities closer to the coast have always experienced certain degree of vulnerability, and especially because of Odisha's largest coastline, we have all see that coming through. So, Sanjog.
Thank you. Before I begin, just a quick report to what Dr. Killemsetty said about the rehabilitation out of the Jaga mission. Even on the Chhatarpur Ganjam side, there were a lot of people who've complained, at least anecdotally, because I was a part of a WTI study last year, which was looking at something else, setting up mobile veterinary services in that area, and that involved talking to a lot of fishermen, and some of them happened to be from villages that were displaced or resettled. And a lot of them said that while they're happy with the infrastructure that they got, like to live, at the end of the day, their livelihood depended on them being close to the sea,
Yeah.
cyclones or
Yes.
coastal erosion
Yes. Mhm.
aside. So many of them had to dock their boats, far away, and it was becoming very difficult for them to
Sure.
pursue their lifestyle. But that also brings me back to inside the city, the slums that have fortunately become, gotten enough focus in our conversation today, because there has been a lot of constant change of livelihood, in the sense that a lot of people who were dependent on the larger area of Berhampur, which had streams and water bodies, where people used to, if not for livelihood, but for food security, they were dependent on those water bodies to fish. That's not at all possible anymore, because we have repurposed all of these streams and water bodies to becoming essentially sewage carrying channels. So this is again to bring the focus back into water bodies and looking at viewing Berhampur as a waterscape, which is inside a small delta. I think reimagining Berhampur as that would matter a lot, would factor in a lot as we try to reimagine its future. Because so far, all our conversations, public discourse has been equating large industrial parks, corridors. Every time there's a big announcement that okay, this is the way towards growth and development. But if you look at the average person in the city, be it Berhampur or elsewhere, but especially Berhampur, if you go to a I don't know that Biju Patnaik Park or any of those parks, the average person would think of their anxieties would for the future of Berhampur would have to do with the fact that the city has close to zero green cover, right? Yeah, unplanned, less than 0.5% or something, according to the very website of Berhampur. The service level implementation plan. It talks about increasing it 30 times to 15% over the next 10-15 years. Now, how do you do that? Other than by simply displacing the very people that that has not it's not succeeded at any level, right? Like this not possible to do this. So one way to reimagine it would be to look at the waterscape of Berhampur, which may be involving greening, which is not done by way of removing people and creating green parks, urban parks there, but actually using those waterscapes as reimagining how we can do river redevelopment, the water body redevelopment, where there are a lot of nature-based solutions now that actually work a lot better than mechanical solutions of sewage management. And those nature-based solutions actually, involve creating green cover, which would, treat the water. So this is probably a kind of, killing two birds with one stone, to create use a very outdated, proverb. I think that the future of Berhampur, if we have to reimagine it, would somewhere involve increasing the green cover without, disturbing the existing fabric of the city. And that might actually involve reimagining how we view our waterways and our water bodies. I think there's already a lot of enough of a public awareness when you look at the Ramlingeshwar, park or tank, and other places. The people know that Ki Berhampur has always had water bodies which are artificial or natural, but somewhere along we have to look at other cities, India and abroad, which riverine cities or waterscape based cities, where this kind of work has been done. And I think that would go a long way in sort of uh, making the city a little stronger, both in terms of like ecologically, but also in the quality of life. Because at the end of the day, industrialism, or industrial corridors, large those, they might create a few blue collar and white collar jobs, which are again open to everyone from outside the city also, which is great, because then it'll lead to a kind of good, like the kind of migration that all cities need to thrive. But at the same time, that has to be balanced with, I think, reimagining the old city and the existing city and the infrastructure, both as a human but also more than human habitat, where we sort of revive our streams and our water bodies and create those green spaces, which will eventually improve the quality of life, the perceived quality of life, everyday life for everyone. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sanjog. I think that's a very fair way to kind of place it, and you've kind of also shifted the gears in terms of the understanding that how do we plan for a better Berhampur, that say. And I'll try to bring Bhrugu into the conversation and say that what we've also seen, like in larger urban conglomerates, that let's say a Delhi NCR or the greater Chennai Municipal Corporation, they have all extended boundaries, and these are kind of older cities or older townships with an heavy inflow of people coming into this peripheral spaces. So what necessarily we can do for something like a Berhampur is to plan with its extended arms, right? And rightfully, I'm not sure how much of that is going into planning and designing for a Berhampur in that true sense. And how do you kind of break those boundaries of not really making a Digapahandi or the Gopalpur? Because in isolated form, this can only be an island of excellence. But when you stretch the boundaries, there's also flow of people, how people move, how people commute to places, how people start living, accessing some of these services. So, Bhrugu, I was just want to see that some of this, and this could be aspirational, potentially to see that how Berhampur's plan can look a bit differently than how we are planning for urbanization today. Is Bhrugu? You're on mute, Bhrugu.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I said thank you so much, Preeti, that we started. You started with something which I was just about thinking. This is so much of a telepathy. I will take a cue from three of you. I will take a cue from what Dr. Namesh has said with regards to the land rights of people. I will not go into Jaga mission, but I will take, if you are aware that in 2026, this year, in the initial months of this year, there are 14 gram panchayats in outer Berhampur which are now part of the corporation, which means that Berhampur has already started thinking of expanding its boundaries. So this is exactly what we want. However, my gut feeling is, I hope this is purely for the rightful expansion of Berhampur, and it is not only to monetize that land. because there is a fear in Berhampur. There's a fear in Ganjam. I might sound a little political, but there are four things which I have kind of discovered in my last few years of being in the ground politically. There are four things which are very predominant in the new business mindset of Ganjam and Berhampur, and one of them is real estate, um, crime, um, minor minerals, and country liquor. Right? These are the four major crime syndicates which move around in Ganjam and Berhampur. And I will only speak about the real estate part. So, from what Dr. Namesh said, that expansion of Berhampur, there are 14 GPs, Gram Panchayats, which have been recently included into Berhampur Corporation, which is exactly what you initiated in this discussion, that we need to extend our boundaries. Having said this, there is a talk of greater Berhampur in recent times. People have been talking of greater Berhampur. And greater Berhampur would mean including extending Berhampur's corporation boundaries to Digapohandi, to Hinjali, to Gopalpur, to Chhatrapur, and to Chikiti. Right. So this is going to be a huge and a very, very big city that we are talking about going forward. But if and when this is going to be implemented, the city and the city planners and the government needs to plan it out in such a way which should probably give an answer to Sanjog's concern is the ecological part. Is that can we have city forests in it? Can we have urban forests in it? Can we have dedicated places for institutions? Can we have dedicated spaces for markets? Can we have dedicated spaces for community? Can we have dedicated spaces for hospitals? So if the planning is done properly, and if the thought starts from now, probably we could achieve what we are thinking. There are some traditional market places in Berhampur. It's like in any other old town or city. We have these traditional markets of Bada Bazaar, the Sana Bazaar, the Annapurna market, the Hanuman Bazaar, the Bijipur market, vegetable market. So you will be surprised that in these markets, people do not have any ownership on these lands, on the shops, even now. They're still coming under the Gramakantha concept. The government, the previous government, which had committed, and this government. So the previous government said that, okay, we are going to clear this. So I think that was cleared in a hush hush just before the election. And now, when this government has come in, so the document, the ownership, the paperwork, suppose I have a shop in a Gramakantha land in Annapurna market. If the urban corporation gives me a permission to set up a new shop, to do an expansion of my shop, I am unable to do it because of the old papers which are not in my name. So the ownership is not there. And the government has no plans of trying to, expedite this as early as possible. And this is a huge, this is the largest trading center of southern Odisha. The whole of South Odisha depends on Berhampur as a trading center. Even so, having said this, if the government or the corporations do not have a solution to these issues which needs to be sorted out right now without any further delay, there is no point we thinking and discussing about these plans to be implemented. Whether we are talking of the ecology, whether we are talking of the greenery, whether we are talking of expanding Berhampur to a greater Berhampur. The government has already planned has already included these panchayats into Berhampur Corporation. Without the basic things being addressed, there is no point. Number one. Number two, while we are discussing this, the government is planning massive industrialization, massive infrastructure growth in outer Berhampur. This outer Berhampur is under Chhatrapur, Gopalpur, Digapandi, Hinjdi, and Chikiti. So when we are talking of greater Berhampur, and the plan is being done in the greater part of the greater Berhampur, which is still not in Berhampur Corporation. So these two things, the plan, the development plan, and the existing infrastructure, these two needs to assimilate somewhere. So when you are saying that there is a new, the Gopalpur port is going to be expanded. It's going to be double the size. Adani has taken over Gopalpur port. The Gopalpur port has got a new LNG terminal, which they are planning. Adani has taken that. So when you are saying that Gopalpur port is going to be expanded, and when you are saying that there will be a 25,000 crore which is going to be invested in Bahuda port, which is just outskirts of Berhampur on the way to Chikiti. So you're having two major seaports coming in. And we are also talking about the huge expansion plan of SEZ in Chhatrapur. We are talking of two major rail networks from Berhampur to Sambalpur via Kandhamal, and we are talking of the new industrial corridor from Gopalpur to Koraput to Jaipur, which is again which is been allotted to Adani. So when these things are going to come in, when these plans are being made for Berhampur, when Berhampur's infrastructure is being planned in this way that we just discussed, and when you have decided on your topic, on a subject as Berhampur, the gateway to South Odisha, the gateway itself is not ready now for such a massive plan. If we do not do it, then we are probably going to face all the problems that we are seeing now in Bhubaneswar, we are seeing now in Cuttack. Therefore, I think this perspective, this is a very serious concern. All you planners, whenever you are going to plan and think seriously and radically about the urbanization, suggest urbanization in Berhampur or in other towns of Odisha, this needs to be majorly understood. And to add to what the ecology part which was discussed, only last week, we have had news, and we have seen, I was personally there at the ground, there's a huge coastal erosion in the coastline of Gopalpur and Chhatrapur. If you have heard of a small panchayat called Arjapalli, the Arjapalli village is now going to be completely eroded. And the government has not planned anything as yet. So these are all, the plan is temporarily to set up a few boulders, to make walls and to save the panchayat. Maybe you're going to save it this season, you cannot save it the next year. So with all of this happening, and with all of this in our knowledge, and with experts like you and the others in the panel, when you can foresee all this that is going to happen, and with whatever the government is planning, I think we should seriously think about how these challenges can be met. This is what I can think of now.
Yeah, thank you, Bhrugu. And I mean, there's so much that we need to really think about, and I'm just wondering, has it been even thought through till now? When we have flagged an urban vision for entire Odisha and called out certain destinations within the state as the new hubs of urbanization, while we have continued planning for the infrastructure and development, how much of that is going to be a tandem with what the ecology expects or the economy side of it? Is a larger question that now, and I just want to check that what could be potentially like some of the challenges that Bhrugu just flagged right now. What could be some of the institutional mechanisms in which we can create more forums of engagement because of your legacy in terms of understanding the urban subject, and not necessarily from the research, but primarily from being an urbanist in your journey? That how do you kind of answer for or solve for some of?
I wish I had the straight answers. But when Rigu was talking of was mentioning about these large proposals that the state has had, I mean, in terms of approving this economic region corridors and the large scale infrastructure projects, I always wonder what is it that really happens when bureaucrats or people in power just ignore the problems right in front of their face, right? I mean, I still remember I have memories of walking in waterlogged Bada Bazaar as a 3-year-old versus I had experiencing the same thing a few months ago as a 30-year-old man as well. Like in the span of 35 years, the the problems still remain the same when we walk through the old parts of the city. And when you have such when the city has been known to have problems when it comes to like taking care of its like stormwater drainage or water supply or sanitation, it's always fascinating to see how there are this larger than life infrastructure projects or proposals of expanding the city that really grabs the attention. And I guess that's in many ways the purpose of those proposals as well, in many ways, to kind of talk about the larger vision that's supposed to do. So in terms of what needs to be done, I think the first and the foremost is empower spaces where people can actually have the opportunity of talking and of raising their voices. So what's a buzz, what we'd mentioned before. I mean, something in many ways I felt Bangalore was kind of the initiator and did an incredibly good job in the last few years, despite of not having a mayor as well. But still, the What's a Buzz was able to create a space where people could come in, exercise their concern, and those issues were addressed by the cooperators on the ground. Unfortunately, in smaller towns or cities like Berhampur, that still seems to be like an issue just we could put on paper. So we need to kind of ensure how we can have cooperators, we can have all wards to be empowered enough to be able to take decisions to address issues on the ground. And that is not just limited, that's not just limited to deficiencies in infrastructure, but also larger housing issues, larger concerns about who gets a patta and who does not, in terms of if a particular person, if a particular landowner or a property owner who was once a part of the village, but now because it has become part of the municipal corporation, is he or she expected to pay property taxes? I mean, unfortunately, we still lag behind those spaces where we can have common citizens coming in and being able to create that space where they can kind of talk about their concerns. At the same time, I think a lot of this comes down to really understanding where we really want to grow as a city and maybe as a district. I mean, as Vigu mentioned before, we it's Ganjam receives more than 150 to 200 crore rupees every month as remittances from migrants outside, and to the extent that it is associated with majority of the people. Like I still remember, like my parents come from Aska and Bhanjinagar, and whenever we go there, we always find like every third house having someone who's gone to Surat and spent some time in Surat. Right? And there's a lot of established studies in this itself in terms of how this has created this entire infrastructure where you have out migration of people going to Surat, working in this power loom shifts for 12 hours a day, right? But at the same time, I mean, you understand that while What the state does is instead making this travel all the more easier, right? Now you have the Amrit Bharat Express that starts from Berhampur and ends at Udna itself at Surat, making this mobility all the more better. But what does that do for the housing security that is waiting at both ends of the journey? Right? I mean, still you have people living in Surat, still living in the same informal and unequal housed conditions are thousands of kilometers away as well. So I think in my perspective, a lot of importance, first of all, has to be given to those local problems that is there right standing in front of your face. And then it makes a lot more sense in terms of emphasizing on how do you really expand. It definitely makes sense to like look beyond how do you expand the city, but the priority has to be in terms of taking care of the core infrastructural issues that are happening at the city level.
Yeah. No, that's a great way because migration has its own perks,
Yeah.
and it also has its own demerits. And I think a lot of our conversation has been circulating around the infrastructure of the urban that Berhampur is looking forward to. But there is also a cohort of migrant population who have actually decided, like, they have decided to leave their place because of lack of, let's say, the economic side
Opportunities,
of
yeah.
it. Yeah, so they've made that movement. And Bibhu, I would just also try to bring in like something that we didn't discuss was about the local enterprises or the some of these traditional, let's say, economies that existed in the localities. Like there was a weaving tradition. It's also the silk industry that had flourished. Right now, a lot of people have actually moved out in so many ways, but what we have also failed to do is not being able to retain some of these traditional industries. And how do we kind of strengthen these parameters is something we don't need to create fresher opportunities, but we can still do it by retention of some of these uh, possible directions.
Yeah, I think this is a great point, Preeti, that as Bhriku Bhai has already mentioned that Berhampur has a rich culture and heritage, and also it has the Berhampur silk. I think is famous for I mean after the Sambalpuri pato and Sambalpuri clothes, I think Berhampur is also equally famous. But if you look into the current situation of the weavers, so there was a weavers cooperative which is almost defunct, and there are very few households. I think weaving communities are there and doing their occupation, and there is a uh, lot of problems and challenges they are facing, including I met some of the silk city weavers a few months ago. So there is issues that their design has not been bring forward, and the raw materials also not available in that scale, and the market of these marketing of their products, particularly the silk saris, has not been up to that mark, and that is why they are not able to get their wages, even their wages, forget about the profit and all these things. So that is what it is the problem. Apart from silk city pato, you know that there is a huge market in terms of acharo, pickles, body, and papado. I think this is famous in entire Odisha. Whenever a Barhampuria comes, generally people ask, I know Berhampur is famous for achar, body, and pampado. So I think that industry, I can say that small scale industries are also now limited to very few households. But having said this, there are a lot of opportunities. I think there are some young people in Berhampur I know personally. They are very entrepreneurial, and a lot of people, a lot of young people, they started a lot of startups. For example, currently there is a big milk industry which is named as Choranoi, which is started by few entrepreneurs. And also looking at that, there are other young entrepreneurs I have been witness that they also started similar kind of entrepreneur enterprises, particularly in milk. And also there are some other things like how other young people, they are also creating their efforts to make the achar body pampad, like how to branding them, make them packaging very well, and also do marketing. So I think the enterprises in terms of these two major areas, and there are a lot of scopes. If you also know that Berhampur is famous for puri, upma, idli, and dosa, and there are a lot of small traders and tellers. If you roam around the city, you will get a teller in every chowk and every square of the city. So there are so many entrepreneurs now coming up with uh, different brands of hotels. So the hotel industry is growing, and also lot of new restaurants coming with some enterprising minds and young people. Apart from that, Berhampur is also famous for clothes and garments, and also famous for gold. I think gold is it's not reached by the young startups, but garments also, there are a lot of new garment shops has opened. So I think I mean, since Berhampur is a commercial city, is an entire South Odisha, I think there are a lot of opportunities for enterprising, and particularly the women enterprises. I think I have seen also there are many SHGs, and group of women has come forward to make branding of achar body and pampad. So I think the government should come forward. Apart from the large industries, they should also think of that how they will pump lot of skills, knowledge, lot of financing and available funding to these enterprises, particularly the women and young people, youth, so that they will come up more enterprises by taking all these industries. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Bibhu. This was interesting because when we think about livelihood opportunities, we are thinking about big industries coming up, people having access to job. But what we lose out in the interim, that these older cities or cities with the legacies often also have this local unit of existence, which are traditional, which are family run, and they have been kind of factoring into a lot of this economics of this city. And when we are imagining cities are the economic hubs, we often lose out on this very fundamental part of the how cities are designed in that sense. And while we are getting closer to kind of our time, and if we still have 15-20 minutes, what I would also want the panelists to kind of bring into light, and I'll start with Sanjog on this, is that just make it like what are one or two big things that you think that Berhampur should prescribe in terms of its own urban vision. And you can also pick in on the peri-urban farmers or bring in your experience from Mati farms into it. But I leave it open. How do you kind of see one or two aspects? And the question will remain same for each of the panelists in that.
Okay, thank you for asking me that. I think Bibhu is sort of preempting everything that I wanted to say about, the small scale economics of Berhampur that drive the city. It's very well known for its chilies, pickles, the spice markets. It's overwhelming. The scale of that economy is something that I don't think we'll get a sense of by sitting and talking here. You'll have to actually go to the markets to see. There are small vendors who, on an average, would put established businesses to shame in the amount of revenues that they generate. And this is primarily because of, and it's not just trading, it's because of the value addition, there are, that they do at a cottage level. And I don't think we have to worry too much about the future of Berhampur that way, because as everyone has said, it's a very entrepreneurial city. To me, as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur, it's been very inspirational. I do see a few concerns in the sense that, just to give you one example, Berhampur actually has a very high grade tapioca, cassava, that is grown in the, again, the beside the river streams and, in the peri-urban areas, which older, people who have been familiar with Berhampur would know. They're called tapioca chips or cassava chips also. Increasingly, the availability of the raw material itself is decreasing, and therefore the city as such does not, you don't get it everywhere. But you'd be surprised to know that one of our major successes at Mati Farms has been simply to procure this tapioca and process it in a unit in Cuttack and then export it to Kerala, where they are a big. So it's crazy that Berhampur as a city is providing the very tapioca that is required in southern India, and that the demand is far more than the supply. And imagine what we could do if we could connect the dots and we could actually like look at the culture, the past of the area as a producer of this, and why is that reducing, or why are the farmers not getting adequate value? Similarly with lotus stems, nowhere else in India would you get lotus stems, which also require that water, standing water in the land to be produced. And Ganjam as such is the only remaining I would say medium scale producer of lotus stems. And increasingly you don't get that in the city, because even the traders who deal with it would say that we get it from Andhra Pradesh now because you don't get it here. So there are some gaps there, I think, where we need to look at, and it's all about looking at smallholder economics, I would say, about what works for small scale industries. Often our policy level focuses on, those big projects, and, like Namesh said, there's a reason why those are, marketed, or those are highlighted so much. But I think that simplification of, the ground realities, and the ground reality is that we have a lot of entrepreneurial city in the spirit in the city that needs to be harnessed, which we at Marty Farms have experienced at a very, like, or benefited from at a very small scale level ourselves. But there's just so much there. Pineapples. Not many people would know that Berhampur is actually becoming a hub for pineapple export to other states, simply because Gajapati, part of undivided Ganjam, has a very sweet variety of pineapple which was introduced 50 years ago by horticulture, scientists. And now, I mean, the breed factor, the sweetness of it is better than that of the Tripura pineapples. And we have tested that. We have the reports for that. But we see that, there is absolutely zero awareness at the, policymaker level, that this is something that can, the existing trader channels of Berhampur can leverage and promote. So I can go on, for a long time about this, but I'll stop here. But I think these are, besides, what I've said about how we can reimagine, the waterways of Berhampur, in, bolstering its capacity to protect itself against environmental excesses of the future. This is another thing that I would like to add, which is that, it's something that's there for the taking for us, and we should definitely leverage that.
Thank you, Sanjog. You were on a spree to bring in all of these lenses in the quickest possible time. So, I'll ask Dr. Namesh, what are your, and I think when I ask you a question, I'm a little biased, because for the kind of urban perspective that you bring in. While the intention of this webinars is to break that barriers of what is urban and what is not urban, but yeah, maybe I'll look forward to something more technical, something more greater in that.
I mean, for the way I look at it is, I mean, if you're trying to understand or envision what the city's future would be, I mean, for me, first of all, migration to the city or to the district will not stop. It will increase all the more further with all the development that is being planned for the city, for the larger city as such, in the coming decade or so. The biggest question that I should have, if I'm a person of power, if I'm a person in power, or the primary bureaucrat of the district, is to understand what is the visible plan that I will have for the people who come in to live. And if so, what is the nature of policies, I mean, that has to be incorporated? Now with the Jaga mission, I don't know if I should call it pseudo suspended or whatever it is. In that condition, what happens? What is the kind of provisions that we bring in to people who would want to move in to a city and kind of try to take advantage of the economic opportunities available? That, I think, is one of the biggest aspects that the city administration should look at. At the same time, it is fascinating. Thank you so much, Sanjog. It is all these years I had no idea about the aspect of pineapple. I mean, and I think that's definitely something I'm going to talk to my family as well and see where you can get this. But this is interesting. I mean, when even Bibhu talked about the silk, the Barampuri patta, right? Despite having a GI tag and centuries of weaving history as well, the number of active looms have come down from 500 to less than 50 in not in a span of less than 3 decades. So now, while there are this youth-led revivals going on, and the Silk City Festival as well, where there are these young designers reworking the craft and so on, but what is the kind of opportunities that the government provides, in addition to saying, not just saying that ठीक है, you have a self help group बना लो, वहां से आपको funds मिलेगा, वहां से आप इसको develop कर लो, but what is a formal process that can be established to revive this culture, in terms of to exploit the rich heritage that we have, not only when it comes to weaving, when it comes to food, when it comes to all these aspects that the city has a strong legacy on. From an urbanist perspective as such, and I think the way I was trained and the way I've been looking at things, it finds like I always find it fascinating and yet disturbing when cities always plan for the future in such a way where they talk of this massive projects and the large scale infrastructure that they want, but yet they just ignore the most simple thing. What is it for the people who are living in it? So I think first and foremost, the primary focus has to understand what is the requirement of the city. You've redeveloped the Biju Patnaik Park. You've created at least it's glad that in the last decade, as Sanjog mentioned as well, we've been able to kind of bring in at least some of the those what the ponds that had been completely unutilized and left at ease for decades, and now they have been maintained well, they have been bought, made it open, redeveloped into parks and all as well. But at the same time, what is the nature of facilities that are beyond that? I mean, as something as simple as, be it public transportation, be it access to as simple as water supply. I mean, even to this day, 40% of the city still relies on public water taps, right? And despite having Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and the zero defecation that on paper, but still public toilets, I'm not even talking of individual toilets. I mean, in majority of the slums, public toilets still do not work. So in these cases, I think these are the issues that needs to be understood. And it's not that it's rocket science to be able to find solution to it. I mean, there have been all of us as urban planners and those who study this and those who research on this, and even those on the implementation side know the solutions. But how do we kind of make sure that we're able to reallocate the budgets, kind of re-emphasize the priorities of what needs to be done? And I think only then it makes sense to look at a larger picture and talk about, okay, what are the more than the larger than life projects that we should do for the city and for the district.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Namesh. Bibhu?
Yeah, I think so. If I had to summarize my perspective in a few sentences, Berhampur's future cannot be built only through physical infrastructure. We have to invest in the infrastructure of people's lives. That means that water and sanitation, affordable housing, close to opportunities, safe mobility, healthcare, childcare, and public spaces. But equally, we need to recognize the economic infrastructure that already has existed. Our farmers, informal workers, women-led enterprises, young people, and local businesses. I would like to see Berhampur where these groups are not treated simply as beneficiaries or obstacles to development, but as economic partners. And ultimately, I would measure the success of Berhampur 2036 not simply by how infrastructure we build, but by whether a young people can get opportunity, a woman can move safely, a worker can earn with dignity, a farmer can retain a viable livelihood, and a low income family can access a decent quality of life. That for me is the inclusive urban development should mean. Thank you.
Now I'll move to Bhrugu and ask him to help us kind of get a closure in terms of a panel and his perspective.
Um, I was trying to play safe all this while. I now sound a little political and be a little critical. That's all I can help in this discussion. Um, the first thing that, from whatever I've heard, I'm just trying to join the dots. There is an industrial estate in Berhampur, which is completely non-functional. The people who have been allotted those industrial estates, those industrial plots, are now earning their money on rentals. The government has to immediately look into this and start reworking on this industrial estate and see that local entrepreneurship starts functioning there. When I say this, I'm trying to bring in what Mr. Sahu said about the pickle industry. The pickle industry can have a corridor inside the industrial estate. We are talking of a food. We can make a food processing unit inside the industrial estate. You don't have to do anything new. You just have to rework on the existing industrial estate. I heard Sanjog saying that about the pineapple. Well, it's the pineapple of Gajapati or the turmeric of Kandhamal or the spices everywhere or the pulses across Ganjam and Koraput and Rayagada and Gajapati and Kandhamal. This is what people from Ganjam did. This is what I said when I said that the first migration started there. People went to trade. People went to help the farmers, the tribals, to do this farming so that they could bring it back to Berhampur town, city, and then start selling it. And therefore, Berhampur has always been a trading structure, trading setup. Therefore, this can be encouraged. So it is. There is a huge. Do we all know that the Chhatrapur, Gopalpur, Berhampur cluster is one of the largest producers of kevada. The entire kevada industry in Uttar Pradesh, majority of it survives with the kevada flowers from our place. And yet the government does not have a plan. The previous government did not do anything about it. The present government also is doing nothing about it. So we can plan the kevada industry. Recently, the government of Odisha inside the assembly said that Odisha has about 12 gold mines in Odisha. And now the Odisha government wants to start mining that gold. Whereas we have not addressed as to how to connect. The plan has to be done from now. The largest trading of gold is done in Berhampur. We have not provided, and for this, we do not need anything new. We just have to connect the dots. So, having said this, we can plan livelihood in smaller ways, in smaller clusters, like what you said, Preeti. We do not need large industries. We can think of these smaller ones. I am personally against this Amrit Bharat train. This is only encouraging migration. While we say that more than 200 crores come as remittance to Odisha, we also need to understand that we need to provide opportunities to this expertise of the Berhampur and the Ganjam people. If a dye master from Berhampur and Ganjam does not go to Surat, the entire Surat textile industry comes to a halt. So if the entire textile industry in Surat is surviving on our people from Ganjam and Berhampur, why shouldn't we be addressing this? The previous government did not do it. The present government before elections promised the universe, hasn't started doing anything on this. And how is this connected? Is this beyond urbanization? I do not know. I'm not an expert in the urban subject. But I'm just thinking that while we play down this huge industrial planning that we are doing, was it necessary for the LNG terminal to come right now in Gopalpur port? Or was this a more priority? Which is a priority? We need to understand. Therefore, I think now's the time when push comes to shove. I think it is time now when people start calculating, and I think people from our place, who, as I said initially, that we are very emotional. So we'll start now asking the government, what are we giving and what are we getting? How much are we giving and how much are we getting? If my place has expertise of textile and dye masters, why should I have to go all the way outside? If my people can grow kevada, why should I just sell it to the traders in Uttar Pradesh? If my land, I do not have the quota of my land, why shouldn't I get it? If my um, if there is a scope of my city to be expanded to 14 panchayats and then beyond 5 towns, then why shouldn't it happen? If if new potential employment is generated, why shouldn't it happen? We have all seen during COVID, right? People walked all the way from Kerala to Gopalpur and to Chhatrapur to Berhampur because that's the way life was. And they went back. So we couldn't stop them. We couldn't stop them because we couldn't have an opportunity. So, having said all this, urban planning, urban potential, availability of resources, holding on to the ecology, all put into one frame needs to be addressed. I do not know, maybe Preeti now has to initiate um, uh, a concept note and a memorandum, a plan to the government of Odisha, especially for Berhampur, so that we could take this forward. We can keep on discussing, we can keep on chatting, but maybe the answers are more. Uh, uh, the good part about such discussions is that we are sharing our thoughts, but the answers are more when they are framed with the right suggestions to the government and we are able to force the government to start implementing them.
Thank you, Bhrugu. Thank you so much. And I think it's been very amazing kind of conversation. I've personally kind of enjoyed sitting through, listening to different perspective around it. And since we are just 12 minutes away from our closure, I will request Kirti ji to kind of do a little bit of concluding remark to this conversation. And he not only does a context setting, he also kinds of does a closure to this because he is able to synthesize some of the perspective that we kind of blend during the course of our conversation here. So over to you, Kirti.
No, Atuk, you are giving credit for something I don't deserve. But I essentially have 2 or 3 ideas which I wanted to examine. This has been one of the brightest panel I've seen, honestly. It's very, I don't know the place. Places don't really kind of make sound to me. I don't see them geographically. But I understand what is being said. And therefore, this last in passing suggestion, I want to take it very seriously if it's possible. And that is this. Can we put together a people's plan of Berhampur coming out of this particular event? I'm sure there is a lot to be added, but just if this comes out of this event itself, the 2-hour event, it has enormous number of ideas. And I'm saying this because you're just speaking your 4, and I think we 120 minutes. Each one probably got about 20 minutes. You essentially have poured your hearts in 20 minutes, and you have huge number of other ideas which have not come through. So I would very much request not only Preeti ji, I don't want to put the burden on her, I want to put burden on all 5 of you, including myself, 6 of us. Can we think about this? Can something come out? Can in the next 3 months' time produce a 30-page paper, a 40-page paper, or 20-page paper saying this is the outcome of. And I think, as a matter of fact, not only that, why 4? We had something like 20 people who spoken earlier. But even if I have 4, I think it would be terrific. Government, people deserve it. The place deserves it. And I think, it would be brilliant piece of paper work if it comes out. So this is my first request, not only request, I'm saying let's do it, full stop. And tell me how do we go about doing it, because I'm an outsider. But someone invited me to go there in November sometime. So I'm going to be there, but that is neither here nor there. This is number 1. Number 2, while introducing this webinar series, I mentioned about 154 webinars, and it talked about this being the 5th webinar of the series we are doing on cities of Odisha. I forgot to mention, as I said, I'm so capable of forgetting, that we also did a very interesting webinar series on Jaga Mission. We did 5 webinars, and the subject was slums are solvable. That was the theme. And you'll be very surprised, who did I have the partner? I had UN Habitat as a partner, Cities Alliance as a partner, Government of India as a partner, Government of Odisha as a partner. What I heard, especially from Dr. Namesh, and I'm going to call him tonight or tomorrow probably, is this, that before I heard about Jaga Mission, I have been selling this idea for a long time, for last 20, 25 years, the in situ slum upgrading as a way to going about dealing with the whole issue of slums. No government can build pakka houses for everyone, and people know how to build housing. And if you take that as a starting point, you go very far. And I have been telling everyone, including day before, I made a big bhashan in Bangalore and once again talked about this wonderful thing called Jaga Mission. I'm beginning to hear a different, I'm not saying critical, but different vision and perspective and ideas, especially from Dr. Namesh. It's not all hanky-dory. And I'm very concerned. It's not issue of a project being good or bad. We're talking about future of large number of poor people in our cities. Not only were there, those are going to come in. If we are going to talk about 870 million people coming to in our cities in the next 25 years, we are also talking about large number of people going there. And therefore, I'm personally thinking, if you agree, that I would like to do 2 webinars on real Jaga Mission. Once again, I'm not interested in criticism. I'm not saying that. I'm very keen on understanding what is really happening. Because if you're projecting something as a model, if you're putting something and appraising on the high sky, which I do all the time, it's much better. And I think, it's probably difficult for someone far away from your place to get a good vision. So I'm requesting Dr. Namesh ji and Preeti ji and all of you to help organize 2 webinars at least on what is really happening. Sorry, just give me a second. I think there's a phone. Let me stop it. So that was the second thing. And third thing, Namesh Saab, is I'll talk to you personally.
Sure, sir.
But I also, it's also has a larger connotation. We were running a competition series for last 5 years called Improving Livability of Small Houses. And that is essentially from the fact that I realized that there are a lot of pluses to Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Its one minus is it's very poorly designed in terms of product. And we thought that we need to, and I think in the process we've done lots of classroom studios in Pune. And I've approached your institutions 3 times over without success. So I also wanted to kind of do that. No, I'm sorry that this is a private little thing, but it's a public work. It's not private work in that sense. So with these 3 ideas, one is of course if we agree, and I think I would like someone, and you are all so brilliant. I don't know whom to ask this question, but someone to structure what I'm suggesting. How do we structure presenting a perspective that came around on people's plan for Berhampur? I think like someone to structure it, and not take it as something that came out of a webinar and therefore to be forgotten once we close the computer. And I'm also very, very keen that we organize this 2 or 3 or 1 whatever webinars on Tega Mission in its broader framework sort of thing. So thank you very much once again for this absolutely stunningly brilliant exposure. And Preeti ji, as always, you've been moderating it remarkably well. Sanjog Saab, I would like to kind of meet you sometime to understand more. You're brilliant. Namesh Saab, I'm in Pune, I think on 2nd. I don't know if it works out, I'll come and see you. Bhrugu Saab, and Bhrugu Saab, I've not understood what are your political connections, but you are absolutely stunning. The kind of history is understanding and what you brought out, and this whole connect, not only understanding of culture and history and this, but its relevance today, its connect today. Not many people do it so well as you do. And even though I see some white hair in your beard, I'm very keen to connect with you so that we can learn more from you. It's absolute. Each one of you have been remarkable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to the panelists. And I should thank Disha, who shadows me in this webinars. She's never visible, but she's somebody who literally shadows in terms of deciding on who should be the participant. How do we go about some of these conversations? A big thank you to Disha and Jeshna and Bumaji, all of whom have been big support system in putting all of this together.
Thank you very much. Terrific.
Yeah.
I must tell you that if you're interested, we are running a Gujarati webinar series. And it starts today is the 8th or 9th on, and it's every Tuesday, 30. And while we had something like 35 people, you won't believe me, we're expecting something like 200 people in the Gujarati webinar at 8:30 today. So maybe one day I think we should be starting a webinar series in Odia.
Odia. Yes, yes. Must do that.
Thank you very much, sir.
Preeti, homework for you.
Preeti ji, I think anything I want to do, I think I reach out to her and say, look, this is to be done, and it happens. So it's terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Preeti. Thank you so much, Mr. Shah.
Yeah.